Hi, my name's Tyler Albert. I'm a medicine doc and a poem and ICU doc at the VA. An assistant professor at the University of Washington. Paul, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks for inviting us today. My name is Paul Cornia. I still consider myself a general internist, but do hospital medicine primarily these days, and some perioperative medicine, also based at the Seattle VA with Tyler.
And I'll tell you, thanks, Mike, for great slide design in the chat. I'm going to be talking and looking at the slides most. So Shom, if you don't mind, can you monitor the chat box for us and just interrupt if anything pops up? I wish I could take credit for the slide design. I stole it from Trevor Steinbach. It took me hours to get him to give it to me, but it worked. Shom asked Paul and I to come talk about some of the work we've done over the last year, and just really to describe how some of the scholarship that we've done over the last year and how it came to pass, like pull the curtain back on like the intentionality behind it and some of the details about how we actually like got from idea to publications, really. And I think, Paul, I don't know if you want to talk about how this will go with.
Yeah, So the frame for this, I'll say that we're none of this is meant to be like self-promotional on our part, although we're kind of talking about work that we've done over the past year or so, and some of the the publications that have come out of it. It's not intended to be a pat on our backs, but more just to kind of walk through the process of how this came to be, and hopefully this will be useful to others to get scholarly product. And some of this, Tyler and I are going to kind of riff back and forth to some degree and interrupt each other on purpose as we go through. This will be conversational to some degree in nature, and we really, if you have questions, please do feel free, or comments as we're going along. Feel free to raise your hand or pop something in the chat, and we're happy to break at any point.
Yeah, great. And with that, we will get started. We don't have any disclosures, at least financial ones. And here are the objectives. They're broad and maybe high-reaching, but the hope is that after listening in on this talk for the 45 minutes or so, you'll be able to transform some of your clinical and academic ideas and interests into scholarship. We're going to give you some resources, or at least describe the resources that we've used that might hopefully maximize the impact of your scholarly project. And then hopefully we'll be able to help you avoid some common pitfalls that have derailed some of our productivity and also others. Here is Shom's diagram of how to get from idea really to disseminate scholarship. I really like it, and we're going to focus on this middle part, the authenticity and societal context with the problem, purpose, and audience. Dr. Starks and Shom have set up other faculty development workshops on how to do some of this other stuff, and we'll be talking about that in the future. I'm going to start at the end actually here, the impactful scholarship. When we and all of us are coming up with ideas and want to produce something, it's really helpful to think about like who are we trying to impact, like, and it's impactful for whom? Is it for yourself? Is it that you're trying to make you feel better for making change in the world, move the needle with terms of patient care or science or education, or even improve your CV or learn how to write, whatever it might be. There's lots of different ideas on how you can do things for yourself, which I think is totally fair game. Is it for trainees? Is it for patients? Is it for the hospital? Is it society? I think figuring out what the ultimate goal is helpful in helping figure out how you're going to approach a topic. And really that gets back to this initial idea and authenticity. Paul and I have kind of gone back and forth a lot about what authenticity in societal context means, because I think we have differing views. For me, it's really about being passionate about the project, or being invested in the question, the process, and maybe even the outcome, hopefully. so that you can move the needle in whatever realm you're operating, be it medical education or quality improvement or whatever realm it is. You care about it for multiple reasons. I think that's where the authenticity piece comes in, and I think that's probably the most important part whenever you're starting down the path of trying to turn ideas into scholarship.
I'll just, it's exactly right, Tyler. And I think that I just want everybody to take a moment and look at the diagram on the left part of the screen there, and the centerpiece of this being the authenticity and societal context, almost the why of the study. Why are you doing this study? Why are you doing this project? Why are you interested in it? I've certainly found myself many times over the years with an exciting idea, to me at least, and jumping directly into steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, reviewing the literature, thinking about how, what the next steps are, how I'm going to get data, and not taking the time, the necessary time up front to really carefully think about why I'm doing this, why I'm invested in it, why it is important to me and to others. Maybe that's society as a whole. Maybe that's my kind of more micro society of the group that I'm working with or the hospital that I'm in. But I think that I think we really want to kind of underline that 3 times right up front here, is to take the time up front to make sure that you understand why it is authentic to you and what the societal context will be to you before diving in. And as Tyler was alluding to, the critical importance of that is that something that you are invested in and passionate about, and that can be for a variety of different reasons that you're invested and passionate, is much more likely to lead to that end point of dissemination of product in some way, shape, or form.
Anybody, before I move on, this is kind of a vague term. Does anybody have any questions about authenticity? I'm going to get into societal context in the next slide or two, but any comments or questions people have about this? Because we've struggled with it. No. Okay. This is a schema that I've tried to come up with, like what it is that I do at work, frankly, and why I show up, why I work in an academic center, and what I care about. I do patient care, I do education, I do scholarship, and that used to be maybe research, the 3 pillars. But and many times, ideally, we would do something that would hit all of these at once, but it doesn't have to. Many times I do education about patient care, or I do scholarship about education, or I just do patient care. But I found that things are more authentic, and I'm going to use this yellow circle being the authenticity and society, this context of society, as like the sphere. I try to operate within this yellow circle because that's what it means to be, that's the authenticity piece for me. And if I'm doing stuff that's outside of this yellow circle, if it's not authentic, then it's going to be less, I'm not going to say less fulfilling, but it's going to be, I'll be doing it for different reasons. I'm going to be very intentional about it, I guess I should say. And I'll give you some examples of when I'm doing stuff that's not authentic versus when I am. And I try to mainly operate within this yellow sphere. And sometimes you can focus and narrow down, like you could do scholarship on, you could do a project on how to teach residents on how to do telemedicine during COVID. That would fit within this very focal societal context. Or like a project I did a couple of years ago with Marianne and some other colleagues about microaggressions in internal medicine residency, and how to focus in on that. Or the societal context could be a bigger picture, a bigger issue that really envelops everything that we do, like the Black Lives Matter or the Me Too movement, that it really impacts everything that we're doing, and we need to rethink how we're being doctors in every one of these spheres. And so I think it may be kind of vague, and I know I'm trying to force the idea of authenticity and societal context into this like yellow circle that doesn't really fit really nice, but this is kind of the realm that I'm trying to operate in. Does this make sense to anybody? People have questions. Paul, anything you want to add to this?
The ad, I would say, yeah, and we're, again, we're intentionally trying to carefully describe this because, and maybe this is just for Tyler and I, but this, it was the concept of this was not necessarily, it's not second nature, so to speak. It takes some, I think, time and mental energy to put it in kind of in the right context for the work that we're doing. And so we're trying to be upfront here in this talk a little bit, really to dive deeply into the terminology a little bit and the whys. The add-on that I would say that, when Tyler had the big yellow circle that's encompassing all of these three arenas, the societal context of big changes that we're seeing out there, things like the Me Too and Black Lives Matter movement. The example that we would give for that is, so what we recently submitted a talk to the National Society for General Internal Medicine. There are clinical updates that are given every year at these national talks, clinical update on hospital medicine, outpatient medicine, and there's a clinical update on medical education as well. And it struck us that, again, the times, the times call for something a little bit different in in this wider societal context. And the pitch that we made to SGIM this year was to focus a talk on diversity, equity, and inclusion and bias in medical education studies for this year. That's what we're all facing and dealing with in our day-to-day lives. We were really fortunate that they've given us the platform to give a talk. And again, this is not like, hey, great job, the two of you. The point is that this is meaningful to us. This is really important to us right now in our world. It's important to society as a whole. These issues are equally important in medicine and medical education, and we wanted to explicitly say that.
Yeah, and I'll give another example. Thanks, Paul, for that. Is that over the last year, when the COVID first hit, I was asked to participate on the convalescent plasma guidelines writing committee for the University of Washington, and like that is not authentic to me. Like I don't care about that in terms of scholarship. I don't care about that really clinically. I cared about it because there was this massive pandemic going on, and so like it was squarely in this patient care arena, and not so much, and maybe with education, but not with scholarship, and it wasn't in this yellow circle. But I still did it. Did I enjoy it? No, but I knew going into it that I wasn't going to be investing energy so that there would be scholarship later on. Like my goal at the end of this was not so that I could have a publication and have impactful scholarship. It was to have other impact. And so it's okay to do things that don't fit into each one of these nice little circles or spheres, but you got to make sure that you do it for the right reasons, I guess, is all we want to imply. I guess before we go on, I'm going to stop screen sharing right now. Paul, I don't know how many people there are, if we should break out rooms or if you want to just hear if anybody, is there anybody that has a project going on right now or that they've done in the past that they would say is authentic to them or is not authentic? I'm just curious, like what does authenticity mean to you when it comes to scholarship? Anybody?
No right or wrong answers here.
Right.
This is explicitly, we're talking through this because we have been talking through this a lot more of late, Tyler and I, and we'd love to kind of engage you in a little conversation, really, to make sure that this makes sense to you, and that it seems like it's something that it's that's usable in your day-to-day work and scholarship.
Yep, and Paul, maybe this will be a good time for you to describe our different career trajectories. But I'll let you get into that. I've gotten better over since training, of going through training, of making sure that I only do projects that I care about, that I'm passionate about. And so focusing everything squarely within that authenticity sphere, doing authentic work to me that I'm passionate and that I care about. Because the proof is in the pudding, is I don't complete the things I don't care about. I don't do them well. They smolder, they bother me, they sit in the back burner, and I'm annoyed that I've got these projects that I haven't finished yet, and then they just kind of die. And then I feel like I've let down my mentors who I was like supposed to be doing that with. And so there's the self-worth piece, but then there's also like you're burning a little bit of bridges, and you burn a little bit of credibility with people that you were hoping to learn from, theoretically. And so I've very quickly realized that I can't do things that I don't care about. So I think that was the big point for me.
Yeah, and I guess the small add on to that I'll make is that early in my career, I certainly worked on projects for which the content was not particularly scintillating to me. But it was the authenticity. There was still authenticity there, and in my I guess broad definition of it, the authenticity, the reason, the why for it was for me to learn. That me working with a more senior person, a mentor, who could teach me how to write well, or write better at least, how to properly do a literature review. Those were really important things early in my career, and I think the pitfall that I fell into is that I kept doing that probably for longer than I needed to, and then so I was, at some point doing these projects that I wasn't still wasn't terribly passionate about, and I wasn't getting as much out of the learning about how to write and how to review and these parts, these parts of the process, I should say.
And Paul and I came to medical education scholarship in very different paths. Like I did my Pulm Crit Care Fellowship, and during which I had great mentorship. I did a teaching scholars program. I did like very intentional studies so that I could learn techniques. And Paul kind of learned on the fly, and so we got to the same place in a lot of different ways. And so there was, and I frankly didn't like a lot of the things that I was learning and doing in some of these programs. And so it's not always, it's good to go through because you learn a lot about yourself, and then that helps with the authenticity piece later on, I guess is the point. I think now's a good time to transition to what we were really here to talk about, is the things that we've been doing over the last year and how this has come to fruition, so to speak. So Paul and I, and I'll just speak for myself actually, really care about Morning Report. It's been something that I think hits on all three of these spheres for me, and so it's somewhere in the middle, if not maybe a little bit to lower to the scholarship and education piece, but it's a personal interest. I've enjoyed it since medical school. I was chief and I just loved it. It's also part of my job now. I set up the attending schedule. I attend most of the time. I mentor the chiefs. And so it's a part of my job. It's a part of something I care about. It's something I'm passionate about. And so because of that, and this is kind of where that authenticity piece fits, it's really in the scholarship and education, is because we started to do scholarship on it. We joined a national VA work group. We've done 3 big studies on what's the lay of the land in Morning Report, who's coming, who's attending, who's talking most of the time, what are the cases about. We've talked about the type of cases, are they scripted and unscripted, and then Paul and I did a big study about what do residents think. And the whole point of this was to help figure out how to improve the learning environment for residents, and ultimately how to improve patient care. And that's what I care about most. That's why I'm in academics. That's why I teach, is because I want to improve the learning environment. Maybe because I had a good one and I liked it, or I don't know, maybe it was a bad one, but I want to make it better. And so that's where this all comes from. And so we were well on that pathway, and we were very intentional about it. Great. So we're doing the lay of the land studies. we need to figure out what the residents want. We're doing another study about what the attendings are thinking and what they're doing and who's talking, and maybe we can do some intervention and show that it's improved. That was our like big picture plan. And then COVID hit, and this was one of these big societal things that like changed everything. The morning report was canceled. In fact, all conferences were canceled for a while. There's no teaching conferences. There was no chief of medicine conferences were all COVID updates. Medical students were taken off of rotations. There's no intern report. There's no resident report. Our autopsy conference on Fridays was canceled. And so they were just all, there was no more teaching. Social distancing rules, and then slowly virtual education was adopted. It took a little bit, and so we had to think about, great, what are we going to do now? And it really was Paul and I and some others, Jeff and some others that we'll talk about, who were sitting here at the VA trying to figure out, well, what do we do? Because we can't just stop resident education. Clearly, like, they're here to learn, and we're here to teach, so we need to figure out how to make that happen. And so this is when you go back to Shom's diagram, and it starts with authenticity and the problem, purpose, and the audience. And so we're going to walk through some of the studies that we've done, or some of the papers that we've published. And again, not to humble brag, like Dr. Krug probably would say that we're doing, but instead to like highlight the intentionality with what we were doing it with and how we got there. And the authenticity piece was that Jeff Redinger and Paul and I were sitting, I remember it very clearly, it was early on in the pandemic, and Jeff and I were in the ICU team room. We're like, gosh, like, we don't know how to teach in the middle of this, and there's nothing in the literature. There was like a small study in the early 2000s from H1N1 in Canada about medical students, but there's like nothing guiding us. So like, what should we do? And we said, well, why, like, we realized that we might be the first people that are dealing with this, but we're not going to be the last, that this is going to spread across the country. And so we said, well, why don't we figure it out and publish it? And so Paul and Jeff and I got together, and we wrote up what we thought were the best guidelines, evidence-based practices, and like what we thought was important. And so and we pitched it to JGME, and they published it soon thereafter. And I think the important part is that it was authentic to us, because we were in the middle of this. We were struggling with what to do. We realized that there was nothing in the literature about it, and so we filled the void. And it was after that we started to be even more intentional about everything that we were doing.
And so the authenticity here, I'll underscore the authenticity part to this, is like the why and the caring and the passion. Like, this is early pandemic, where everybody's scared, everybody's exhausted with all the work that we're doing. But as Tyler and I were talking earlier today, we both also vividly remember being at home after long days in the hospital, and we had a shared document on Google Drive that we could all edit and over edit in real time, and all of us were on it, at like, it's like 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night, and we're all like just so excited about this, like wanting to share something, share our perspective and what we're doing, and this is so unique and cool. That's the authenticity. It's real, it's meaningful to us, and it was exciting for us to put it on paper and try to get it out there.
And we totally used the COVID pandemic to our favor. Like, we knew people were publishing whatever they could get on COVID, and so we knew we had to get it out early, frankly, because this would be something that other people would be writing about.
So that aphorism, never let a good crisis go to waste, right?
Right.
We saw a lot of our, basic science research colleagues, kicking it into high gear, doing COVID related stuff, and thought, we can do that too. These changes, this is a big seismic change in our world too, in med ed. Like, let's do the same.
Yeah, and that gets to the next step, which is the context or the problem. So all these conferences were being canceled. Chief residents were understandably like totally overwhelmed and focusing on the residents as they should be. Like, are they safe? Are we safe? Is everyone like taken care of? Do we need to like get people out of the clinical realm because they've got underlying disease? Whatever it is, everyone was thinking about resident education, but it wasn't the top priority. Whereas for Paul and I, it was our top priority, because I mean, we were doing clinical stuff as well, and Paul was trying to, run the hospital. But other than that, we were thinking about resident education. And Ken Steinberg was like totally overwhelmed and like doing clinical work and trying to keep the residency afloat. And so and our chief of medicine was trying to keep the hospital. So we had free reign to kind of try to make improvements. And so in that context, we came up with a new case-based educational conference. I don't know if Paul, if you want to describe how this happened.
Yeah. So as Tyler was alluding to before, we saw these key teaching conferences that we, in our pre-pandemic lives, this was our comfort zone. Go to morning report in the morning, chief of medicine on Wednesday afternoon, autopsy conference on Friday afternoons, and all these were just suddenly gone. Or if they were still happening, it was just all COVID all the time. This is our new PPE protocol. This is not how we're the new ward in our hospital. And we the gap, the problem for us was that our joy in being in the hospital is teaching, and our trainees are here to learn, and we can fill that void, Let's come up with a new conference. Okay, we can only do it virtually, so let's do a virtual conference. Let's have it case-based. And the initial iteration of this, we rolled it out it filled in our autopsy conference slot, and I did the first one just as I'm gonna walk through a case, and I'm gonna have an audience response system to have questions that I'm gonna embed in it as I go through, and have everybody answer the questions, and that's gonna be interactive. And that was the first iteration. And then we've got others here at the hospital who said to us, namely Scott Hagan and Tom Newman, that are much more interested and attuned to clinical reasoning and the so-called cognitive autopsy. And they thought, man, this could be a really interesting medium to teach clinical reasoning, rather than being in a room physically and being in the literal, almost literal hot seat, and being asked questions and to talk through your clinical reasoning process. Maybe it might be a safer space to do it virtually. And it's not a hot seat; it's a warm seat now. And so let's give that a shot. And that's what this is where this whole Seattle Vice conference came from.
And I had previously published something in medical education, and there's a really good stuff section that it's 500-word little section about describe what the problem was, what'd you do, and how did it work. And so I realized quickly that this was fit perfectly for that. And it was early in the pandemic, and I think they even put a call out, hey, if you've got anything COVID related that's new that you've come up with, let us know. And we wrote this up in a night, sent it in, and it got published a couple of weeks later. And at that point, Paul and I sat down and we're like, great. So we've kind of done our perspective piece, and we've come up with a little bit of an idea. We should take this to the next step. And we'll go through here. So I previously had told you that we had studied Morning Report pre-pandemic, and it was part of this national VA work group. And so we already had this framework. We already had the scaffolding to do a big study on what residents thought about Morning Report. And so it was very easy for us to pivot and do the exact same thing now that Morning Report is virtual. And the whole point goes back to what the whole reason we got into this realm of educational scholarship or scholarly education in the first place was to improve Morning Report. And so maybe some of the stuff that we're doing in virtual report should stick around after pandemic time. We don't know. Let's find out. Let's ask the residents what we wanted to do. And so we enrolled 14 centers across the country with a bunch of colleagues from across the country, including Mike. And actually, I think had the highest response rate. Nicely done, Dr. Krug. And are in the midst of publishing it now through JGIM, and I think it's been really helpful for us because I think we are actually going to move the needle. At least for me, it fits with this authenticity piece and the purpose piece. We're going to move the needle in trying to improve resident education during morning report, because I think some of the things that we're doing during the pandemic actually should stick around afterwards. Maybe not all of them, but like people want to be around everybody and camaraderie. And I personally do not like teaching from my office by myself in front of a computer. I'd rather do it in front of a group of people. But some things are better. Like you can look at images easier. You can do some easier breakout rooms. There's more ways to make it interactive. There's some things that we've learned from this that really have been able to help with the purpose of everything that we're doing, the authenticity piece. And then lastly is the impact and the audience. So everything that we've been doing, all the publications that we've done, the audience, I mean, some of it was for me and for us, very clearly. Like we were like, okay, we need to be intentional about this. We want to get as much bang for the buck as we can, honestly. Like we've done the perspective piece, we've designed a curriculum. We're very easily going to repeat this morning report study. But we realized that we've designed this curriculum, we can actually disseminate the curriculum. The Seattle Vice Conference, there were 12 different very intentional pieces of education that we could put together and sell and not sell, but use as a curriculum. Yeah, thank you. Package as a curriculum, and we did, and we packaged it to MedEd Portal, which is a great place to publish medical education curricula. And so we used some of our local resources with our chief residents. We got some data behind it, and we'll talk about some of that later. But we were thinking about this from the get-go. This was all very intentional. We said, okay, we did the perspective piece. We designed this new conference. Let's get some information about whether it's working, and then we can publish it as a curriculum. And then maybe later on, 6 months down the road, we write a 12 steps article or something about the best way to design a virtual curriculum or something like that. Like there are ways to be intentional about the scholarship that you do. And for us, the audience is really important. Like clearly everything that we're doing is for medical educators. That's our audience. We're trying to move the needle with and specifically graduate medical education. That's the piece that we're the audience that we're focusing on.
And so the way we've laid out this slide, it kind of looks as if each of these projects maps to one of these specific domains, so to speak, in the middle of the slide, and it's not entirely accurate. Really, all of these projects are authentic to us. They all are related to the medical education and often around some conference. But we feel like each of them highlights one of these domains, in more specificity than the others.
Now we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about the resources that we use that were really helpful for us to create this impactful scholarship. The first one, the perspectives piece in GGME, was really, we just used each other. We sat in a room and we bounced ideas off of each other, and it was really helpful. We each had our own experiences. We each have our own expertise. Jeff has a focus on medical students. I'm focused really on residents. Paul has a lot of experience, I'll say that. And it was really a great process because I think we learned a lot from each other. We expanded out for the next one. And again, like Paul said, with all these, this is a little bit artificial. We used everybody we could for each one of these in reality. But for the Seattle Vice Conference, we expanded because Paul and I didn't really have the interest in or the expertise with clinical reasoning and learning theories. And so we reached out to Scott and Tom, who really are interested in it. That was their authenticity piece. And so we collaborated with them to create this conference and make it better. And they really did make it better. For the morning report projects, first and foremost, we started with Helene Starks, our academic research coach, who is paramount to the success of all of these. I mean, I think we'll talk about this in some of the pitfalls, but I think that the sooner you can get her involved, the better it will be. Because she's got expertise in everything, and as opposed to us who have it in almost nothing. But we also used other resources. We used our colleagues who weren't involved with the projects. We presented at works in progresses. I use things that we learned from teaching scholars, and some of these, Paul and Jeff and I each did this medical education research certificate through the UW, which is an 18-month course. And we actually presented, and we used some of we learned how to write survey questions there, and it was really helpful, honestly. And we directly applied what we're learning in these courses to our, and then we used our national colleagues who have their own expertise. And I'll let Paul kind of describe how we got involved with this national work group. But I've always been averse to the idea of joining committees and getting involved with a large group of people, because it to me it feels like there can be like a lot of inertia, and I'm not getting anywhere. And like what Mike was describing, frankly, is that your ideas can be co-opted and then they get taken down this other path. And so I get nervous about getting a lot of people involved, but there can be some really wonderful things, added benefits.
Yeah, we were really fortunate in that the nationally the VA has an academic hospitalist work group that it was in existence a number of years ago, and kind of just dwindled a bit, and was resurrected a couple years ago with a kind of a smallish group of folks that were interested in collaborating across the country. And really by happenstance, the thought was, yeah, let's do some med ed studies. This seems like something that we could all agree is interesting, it's doable. And that's kind of, we were having similar discussions locally about interest in Morning Report, and it was this perfect union for us to kind of get involved. And then and kind of a small enough group that that we didn't get lost in the shuffle. We had a kind of clear voice in the direction, and it offered us this same group then to pitch secondary ideas, like, okay, we've done this one study, we want to lead the next one, and then COVID hits, and we got an even better idea for right now, let's do this. So I think having those the point of that is these national platforms are important. And it's you say, I don't work at the VA, so how do I key into something like that? I too, like Tyler, I've not been super excited about national organizations and professional societies about as outlets for scholarship, but I've come to realize there's a real value there. And so these similar type of work groups, getting involved in national society like SHM or SGIM or ACP, these are big organizations, but they've all got these small work groups that you undoubtedly can find a group of like-minded people that are interested in the same type of work that you are to do this kind of at the national level. So I think the take home there is we'd encourage you to get involved with these.
Yeah, and thanks, Paul. For our med-ed curriculum, med-ed portal curriculum, I vividly remember we actually had a meeting with Helene, with our academic research coach, and she gave us the advice that our data was not as robust maybe as it should be, and we decided to move on anyway. We're like, what does she know? We're publishing this. This is it. And sure enough, the editor came back with the exact same feedback, and so it was a good learning process that you actually should listen to the people that you work with, and that give you
experts
advice.
In the room, they're experts for a good reason.
That's exactly right. But we used all the same resources. We used our local colleagues. We presented it at WIPs, and all the same stuff that we used from the other projects. Quickly, I want to point out that it's very important to be very clear and specific when you ask somebody for help, because the more specific you are, the better the results will be. And it could be that you go to Helene and you say, hey, I have an idea. What do I do now? I don't know how to turn this into
scholarship or a project, or you go to Nick Mayo and be like, hey, this is what's happening at Harborview. Like, is there a way we can make this better? Or like, what do we do? And then you want to like say, hey, listen, this is an idea I want to do. I want to turn into scholarship. Do you want us to help? Do you want to help me with this? Or not? I'm just looking for your input, but you want to be very clear about it. And it all gets to authorship, which we'll get in a little bit. But the more specific you can be, the more helpful it will be for you. And particularly, like I've very clearly gone to Helene and been like, hey, what do I do with these statistics? Help me. Like, I don't know how to interpret these. And so the more specific, the better, I guess, is the point that I want to hammer home.
More specific, the better, and just underscoring the point that we have a rich community of smart people. We, like the University of Washington as a whole, smart people who are really collaborative and like almost without fail willing to help. So like use your colleagues. It'll advance your work.
And the reason I'm harping about authorship, and this gets into the pitfalls, is that I've been in situations, and so because of my history, I've been in situations where authorship has not been established earlier, and it can lead to frayed relationships and awkwardness, and really people can get angry because it can be a lot of work, and if you don't get the credit that people feel like they are due, then it can cause problems down the road. And so my practice now is like, day one, hey, listen, this is the project. This is who I think should be involved. And this is my idea of who's going to be which author, like first author, second author, middle author, last author. And it's important because it's defining roles. And so people are very clear about what the expectations are, what they're going to contribute to the project. Your first author, you're going to be doing the bulk of the writing. Your senior author, you're going to be mentoring us. Your second author, you're going to be doing some writing. Maybe you're going to help us with the statistics. Your middle authors, you're going to do project design, maybe a little bit, and you're going to help us do a little bit of writing, but there's not going to be like the same expectations. But whatever it is, you want to be very careful and deliberate about whether you get people involved, kind of like what Dr. Krug was describing when he said that his project is kind of snowballed and it's been taken out of his hands, because that's a big risk, but also be like establishing important roles. This is what your role is on this project. And I know Shom's really good at that. Paul, you want to weigh in on this one?
Yeah, I won't belabor this one because this is, what I talked about earlier on is I think just being clear with yourself about why you're involved in the project is really important. The authenticity, I think, it can have a broad meaning, and it can be authentic for you to learn from a senior author, a mentor, writing skills and research skills. The authenticity also, it may be a scholarly product that is part of our, in academia, that is part of our advancement and promotion, and bottom line, that's what moves you along. But I think you just have to be clear with yourself about that from the get-go. The elevator pitch part, what we mean by this is once you've decided to begin a project, it is absolutely critically important that you as the lead author or the senior author, that you know what question you're answering with this project. What is the elevator pitch? Meaning, you walk onto an elevator. This is probably more pre-pandemic appropriate than pandemic. But you walk on an elevator, the doors close, you're on there with a colleague, and they say, "Hey, what are you working on these days?" And there should be something that you can kind of come off 2 or 3 sentences. Quickly relay the high points of the project, the why of it, and if you can't do that, you haven't thought about it enough. So it's really important to have that right in the front of your brain at all times.
Yeah, and that I think is gets back to number 4. And really, I should probably have moved this up to number 1. Is that you want to ask for help early and often, and I would say that leads directly to Dr. Starks. And I don't know if this quote can be attributed to her, maybe I just did it in my mind. and I hear it in the back of my throat, is that there's no such thing as asking her too early, but there is such a thing as asking too late. And so like the sooner that you can ask for help from either your co-authors or your colleagues or Helene or your mentor, the better it will be. And I think that really is one of the more important take homes from here. The other thing that I've noticed is that, and this is something I've struggled with, is that you can aim for too big of a project. It's okay to do things in incremental steps, and like really sometimes it's okay to just barely move the needle as long as you're just trying to move the needle. And I've struggled that with medical education a lot. Like my dad was a clinical research scientist. Yeah, he's like solving how to treat people with COPD and describing who should get prone during acute respiratory failure. Like that seems pretty important. Like medical education is like on a different realm, and like we're helping people in a different way. And so you're not gonna like change things overnight. And so it's building a case, and it's okay to do it in small steps. I think you can overreach, and if you try to overreach, then you can like get paralyzed with inactivity. So careful about having too big of a scope.
I think the concrete example of that one real quickly is that, Tyler and I, a number of years ago, sitting in the back of the room in Morning Report, kind of looking at each other saying, one day, like, that was an awesome morning report. And then another day, like, that sucked. And like, why? Like, why is that? And we should be able to make them good all the time. Our goal is to make Morning Report good all the time. And that was too big of a scope. Like the first step, as we like really thought about it and batted it back and forth for a while, that the conclusion we came to is nobody really knows what Morning Report is like across the country. Like there is no like current state of internal medicine morning report. That's the first step. That's what we need to define first. Very different than than let's make Morning Report better, but it's a necessary first step in moving that needle, as Tyler was saying.
Yeah, and then the last piece of advice we'd pass on is that perfect is the enemy of good. Very often, I'm not a perfectionist about very much, but with writing I am. I don't know why, but maybe it was an English major, but I find that I try to like make things perfect before I pass it on, and I'm embarrassed about sending it on to my colleagues before it's like meets my standards. And that can be a problem because then it could take a lot longer than it should. And it's okay to, I've learned that it's okay to send something that's less than ideal if I hit a wall and be like, hey, Paul, I don't know what else to say in this paragraph. Do me a favor, just take it over. And that's like ideal, honestly, because then it grows and it's more authentic for everybody. And I think it's more impactful and it gets better because of that. And eventually Paul will send it back to me and I'll be like, oh, I didn't like the way that was written, but I really like the ideas. I'm going to change that. And so like, Paul knew what I wanted to say. I just didn't, I had like writer's block or whatever it is. And so it's okay to use each other for that. And if you try to just make it perfect right out of the bat, it's never going to go anywhere. Very, very rarely have I've heard of people just doing things perfectly.